All right, let's talk about a figure you think you know, the American folk hero Paul Bunyan. But believe me, the story we're about to dig into goes way beyond the familiar tall tales.
So, we have to start with this one simple question, because the answer, as you're about to see, is a lot more complicated than any storybook would have you believe.
I mean, this is the image we all have in our heads, right? The big, cheerful lumberjack, always smiling, a symbol of good-natured hard work, usually with his trusty blue ox, Babe. But what if that's not the whole picture? What if that's just a really convenient cover story?
Okay, let's get right into it. The analysis we're looking at here presents a totally different interpretation. It reframes Bunyan from just a big guy into a powerful, symbolic force of nature.
So this is the crucial point. In this view, Bunyan isn't really a man in these stories. He's a symbol. He's the personification of this massive, sometimes kind of scary ambition that built a nation. This completely reframes him. He's no longer a folk hero. He's a psychological archetype. You could almost call him a mythological engine for manifest destiny. You know, he gives a human face to this idea that expansion was not only going to happen, but that it was right. And to really get this idea, you have to break down his famous deeds. They're not just whimsical stories here. They are powerful allegories for something much bigger. And all of a sudden, his legend becomes something else entirely. It's like a symbolic blueprint for how to dominate a landscape. Every single fantastical feat he pulls off is seen as a mask for a very real, and often a very brutal, historical act of building a country.
Check this out. This is where the myth gets directly plugged into history. Bunyan's almost godlike power to just level hills, well, that mirrors the very real industrial power that blasted through entire mountains for railroads. The message underneath is crystal clear. No natural obstacles should ever stand in the way of progress. And you see the exact same thing with the logging industry. The myth of him clearing a whole forest with just one swing of his axe, it becomes this heroic story that justifies actual massive deforestation. It frames this huge environmental change as some noble act of taming the wilderness. Now, this is a really powerful idea. The national drive that Bunyan represents, it isn't just about building something new. Creation itself becomes an act of erasure, of completely destroying whatever was there before. And this leads us to a central conflict, a real paradox right at the heart of the myth. The idea that progress and destruction aren't two separate things. They're actually two sides of the very same coin. This quote just gets right to the heart of what the source calls brutal creation. It argues that in this whole narrative, you simply can't have one without the other. The act of building the nation was fundamentally inseparable from the act of scarring it. This table here really lays it out for us. You see, the myth isn't just showing two different outcomes, one good, one bad. Nope, it's arguing that they are a single, indivisible act. The goal, building a nation, required, in this mindset, the complete and total domination of nature. So what does all this mean? Where does this leave us? Well, the core argument here is that the Paul Bunyan we all know isn't some ancient folktale passed down for centuries. He's actually a much more modern and very deliberate cultural creation. In other words, he was basically invented to put a friendly, heroic, flannel-wearing face on a national impulse that was often really violent and destructive. He's the guy who makes conquest feel like a charming adventure. And this final metaphor, the sculptor's chisel, it just perfectly captures his whole symbolic function. Paul Bunyan is the tool used to create a new nation, right? But a chisel only works by violently chipping away pieces of the original material. And in this case, that material was the continent itself. And that is the final image we're left with. He represents this relentless, forward-moving ambition that remade an entire continent with this casual, catastrophic power and never once looked back at the wreckage it left behind. So, this leaves us with a final thought, something for you to chew on. If Paul Bunyan was a myth crafted to justify the ambitions of the past, then what stories are we telling ourselves now? What modern giants are we creating to put a friendly face on our own unstoppable drives?